All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you. This is a meeting of the local traffic advisory committee, East Goshen, specifically for discussion of Highland Avenue. And we're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We could just stand 1 second and have a moment of silence for all our first responders and everybody in harm's way around the world for our military. Thank you. So appreciate everybody coming out today, whether on Zoom or in the meeting room itself. My name is Derek Davis. I am the Township Manager for East Goshen Township. To my left is Sergeant Ted Lewis of the Westtown East Goshen Police Department. He is sort of the go-to for us when it comes to traffic, all local traffic issues. So we always appreciate his input on these situations. And then we also have Michael Schneider from Pannoni, who is our traffic engineer. So we do have an agenda. I will say, I try to keep it pretty laid back and open for discussion for all this. So we're going to move past pretty quickly the first couple points that I have here in the agenda, and that's kind of the history of it. And then, the current data, and then we'll pretty much get to talking about possible options going forward, public comment, obviously, for people in the room or on Zoom. And yeah, we'll go from there. But I just wanted to, I did actually find just recently the 2006 data that was on the computer downstairs, and I can share the screen here for the Zoom people, but give me a second. So what we have here is, and I wouldn't get into I think it's broken down eastbound and westbound. So I don't know if it's broken down as similarly to what we did just recently in the last couple of months, but if you look at the speed and the percentiles there, that kind of gives you a good indication of this is prior to the speed humps going in. Some people may know the history better than I do that are here in the meeting or in the Zoom, but it looks like it was about 06. I don't know if that sounds correct, but that's when it looks like they were doing the study at the time to see if the speed humps were going to be feasible and also would play a role in being able to slow people down. So if we look at some of the percentiles there, that can kind of give you a good idea of what it was prior to the traffic controls that we have now going in. So again, that was the history. And at the time, obviously, it was decided to put the two in that are there today. So I don't know. I just want to flip back to today so we can kind of compare it a little bit. And again, we'll have time for discussion back and forth. It's not a huge crowd in the room or in Zoom, so we can do that easily. So if we're looking at the totals right there, and then we kind of, and this is the January one. I think the February one actually probably gives the best, most accurate. Talking to some residents, that's probably where they were located in slightly different areas. What was that? March? As far as where they were located on the street, is that what you're saying?
Small flaw in the data collection is that the transponder was put in different spots along the street in March. I argue that is probably the most realistic data.
Gotcha. Okay.
Where would I guess if you scroll up to the map, which has I think if you scroll up to the previous page,
Mm-hmm.
The map of the road.
Yeah.
Where's it? Is it indicating like where they were actually placed these signs? I think that's kind of what you're getting, right? Like, well, for the January data, I think Mike, you're saying what is it?
I think it was in between 1614 and 1616, which is in between the current speed bumps. February was placed very close off of, right in front of your house, right off of 352. People are still accelerating. March, I think is realistic because it's at 1612. People they're at speed. They're not close to the speed bump quite yet.
But I still think like kind of the main thing you're pointing out is like each time we're collecting these data, it kind of different data points over. Can't really say we're comparing apples to apples at that point, though.
Volume wise, sure, but
Yeah.
speed wise,
Yeah, I think volume wise, it's pretty accurate. But point taken on that. So yeah, March was definitely up near 1612. I know that. Mark couldn't make it. Okay. Mark unfortunately couldn't make it today, so I'll confirm the specific spots with him. But again, I just wanted to give some background on the 06 and
clarify a little bit, 'cause, looking at these, but it's not really much. So what were the percentages? Are these percentages based on how many people are going over the speed limit, that therefore they decided on the speed bump at the time for 2006? Is that what that data shows?
so yeah, this data is from 06. So that's I guess the percentiles right there.
yeah, my remember. So my mother was the proponent and attending all the meetings back in '06. And unfortunately, there was neighborhood politics involved. People agreed that there was a volume and a speed issue, but they didn't want to drive over speed bumps. So the placement of the speed bumps and the quantity, a lot of that unfortunately was driven by.
Can you just hold off for a second? If we're gonna, I just want people to be able to hear and Zoom, and unfortunately, you guys don't have mics. So if we can do it this way, that's probably gonna be better.
Yeah, so
And power.
my mother, Shelley Coover, was a big proponent in the original speed bumps, but unfortunately there was some neighborhood politics involved where people agreed that we needed traffic mitigation, but they weren't fans of speed bumps. They didn't want to drive over speed bumps. And that drove, unfortunately, the number and placement, from what was proposed on your schematic, that was brought up in a Board of Supervisor meeting long ago. And people were like, no, I don't want a speed bump in front of my house. I don't want to hear cars hitting it, accelerating. So that shifted slightly, but I guess my takeaway is arguably with the length of that street, there really should have been more speed bumps, but neighbors were arguing against it. So that's the downfall there.
Well, I talked to Michael about this. I think my big problem with the layout is, and it makes sense from what you're saying, because I think it's imbalanced, obviously, the speed bumps. So it clearly was put in front of people's houses for reasons that you're saying. So,
Shelley Cooper's house.
yeah.
They said, you want a speed bump, we're putting it right in front of
Yeah,
your
so
house.
at minimum, regardless if you add speed bumps or not, at minimum, they're not in the correct places. I mean, you guys know more about traffic than I do, but that's my takeaway from looking at.
And I think something else that you have to consider in 2006, the amount of kids that were actually on the street, if you look at the percentage now, especially of young children under the age of like 12 and younger that maybe don't have the ability to, foresee oncoming cars or a ball runs out in the street, whatever. That percentage has increased like 1,000%, if not more. So I mean, she was advocating in 2006 for that, but now, I mean, the amount of kids on the street, it's dangerous.
We will continue to do so because there's a lot of, that whole south side, the demographic there, you're starting to see a lot of turnover of houses.
So there's a lot of kids and families that are starting to move into this house. I mean, who wouldn't? Those houses butt right up against the East Goshen Park, which Derek, I brought that up in the Board of Supervisor meeting. It's great that we took volume measurements, but what that's not capturing is all the foot traffic from Taylor Avenue, Indian Hills, Alcott Circle behind. So these speeds recorded, it's essentially like walking on Paley Pike, but with no shoulder. You're getting passed by cars doing 30, 35. I mean, I've been out there with my daughter. She's not the best bike rider. You know, she can't stay in a straight line. She's only 7. And these cars, they're whizzing past you.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, well, this is why we're having this. This is why we're gonna bring it back to the Board of Supervisors. You know, we'll talk about it. The only thing I will say, you know, it's obviously always gonna be a little bit of an uphill battle trying to slow people down. I mean, it's not a cul-de-sac out of the way. Sort of the way it's built, the way it is, with, you know, abutting Paley Pike and North Chester, to a certain extent, it is what it is. On that front, not saying we can't try to do as much as we can to mitigate. But I did want to say what we're doing preliminarily, and I brought this up, I think, in emails, is we thought we could do stuff internally, administratively, without any sort of input from on a board level, and we're trying to do that at least preliminarily. We put the supplemental 15-mile-an-hour signs on the speed hump signs, refreshed a little bit of the paint, I think, on the roads leading up to the speed. And then I think today or tomorrow, we had this discussion about the signs down on Jacqueline Drive down in West Town. So those actually 2 signs are going to go up. They're made. So it's going to say, it's a big sign that's going to say residential neighborhoods, 25 mile an hour strictly enforced. And we will put those up. Now, it'll be interesting to see if we get any pushback on those because they're fairly large.
Can I ask, sorry to interrupt, but can I ask, what is the actual holdback? So I haven't been to the last couple of meetings because I've been working, but beyond what I've only heard is the reason is because of snow plows. So is that really the only reason that we cannot put speed bumps on that street? Is it snow plows?
No, first of all, there's 2 speed bumps already. I think.
Which you've already said are not placed correctly. So, you know, that's null and void. But is it snow plows or like, what is it that's actually the reason that we cannot move forward?
Well, I mean, I don't think we ever had a discussion up to this point says, first of all, there's a lot of concerns coming up for residents in the since November, since I had this discussion. But I don't think there's ever been a moment where I've had 3 or 4 residents saying, this is exactly what we want and this is how we want it. So this is why this discussion's ongoing. I don't know. I mean, again, we didn't say no to anything yet. That's going to be a board decision. But I also think, and you know, there's professionals up here that deal with this every day. I think there's a question of what's going to work, what's actually going to have. I mean, I know there's a perception that, you know, adding a couple more speed bumps will just do the trick. I don't know, when you look at the data, when you see what happens in other places around the township and in the area, there's a professional opinion that it's going to be the cure-all for anything. But again, I don't know what the board's going to want to do. I know when I looked at, you know, some of the feedback that they gave in the board meeting, some of them were hesitant to do it. It's not just the plows. I would say it's a little bit of a maintenance thing. I don't think that anybody thinks that should get in the way of the safety discussion, but I think there is a question of what level of traffic mitigation is necessary from a safety perspective and what actually is going to make a difference.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get like the general feeling I got from the last kind of board meeting was speed bumps are going to be probably our last resort. We want to try and get, you know, take measures up, you know, as far as we can go up until, hey, is it so problematic that we need to invest in speed bumps and you know, put forth the committees in order to get those in place. That kind of seemed to be the initial pushback. I think that was from the January board meeting. But that was kind of the general sense that I got out of that meeting is, well, if we're going to do speed bumps, it'll probably be the absolute last thing that we do.
Yeah. But back to kind of Maria's point, I don't think we've ever had, I don't think we ever had a specific moment. I think everybody, again, we were just broadly talking about the traffic concerns and speed humps as one of the possible results. First of all, I mean, if you add another one, I think one would be the most. I'm not the engineer, but I don't think you could get two more on the street.
Yeah, based on spacing and speed humps, they have to be 100 feet from an intersection, so that kind of closes in from the start, then 250 to 600 feet apart, spaced themselves. So three, I think would fit. I don't think four would really fit in there when you went through. Now, to address the question of why not just add another speed hump or why not just put a speed hump in, there's really two reasons that there's some hesitancy to put speed humps in. One is, are they required? And if they're not required, what's the big deal? Where there's an impact to emergency services. So there is a slowdown for emergency vehicles going over. That's why some townships don't put them in at all for that reason. The other one,
If I could say, how do you define, hey, a speed bump is required?
so that's the next part. So PennDOT, we follow their traffic calming manual. And to consider speed humps or any traffic calming, they have certain criteria to be met. One of them is that your 85th percentile speed is at least 10 miles per hour over your posted speed.
Which is now what, 15 or 25?
Posted is 25.
But now they're saying that on the speed hump, it says 15.
That's
So
that's like a
which is
warning
it?
speed to be able to go over the speed hump. That's all it is. That's just a notice to go 15 when you're going over the speed hump. We can't post that road less than 25 miles per hour and have it be enforceable, just based on, state guidelines for posting speed limits.
Which is why the speed humps would help.
Yeah, so to the point of warranting speed humps, right? So right now we have an 85th percentile speed after the speed humps are in, based on the studies, somewhere between, I guess the March study was somewhere between 25 and 30 miles per hour. That's our new 85th percentile speed. It was 34 before the speed humps went in. So the concern is that if we don't have what PennDOT or the manual would consider an actual speeding problem with that 85th percentile speed, then how do you set that metric for other places in the township? So why put it on a road that doesn't have a high 85th percentile speed and then not put it on a road that does? So there's a precedent issue for the township as well. So they have to be careful where they put them, because even though we might think it makes sense here, you have to be able to defend this decision versus another road that may have a higher 85th percentile speed. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that that's the end all be all. That there could be other reasons we say on this road, we do need another speed hump. But from a strictly number standpoint, if you're not over that limit, that minimum limit, it's concerning because a lot of roads aren't over that limit and a lot of roads are over that limit. So it'd be hard to tell the next road no.
The average has to be 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour over.
No, the 85th percentile speed, that's the speed that 85% of the drivers are going at or below. So that's what PennDOT uses for their design. We use it for design in just about every traffic design project that we do. If that 85th percentile speed, that has to be 10 miles per hour over the posted. So if your posted's 25, you need an 85th over 35 to be considered in PennDOT's world for traffic
So
calming.
we want to
based
be
on PennDOT's map.
a reactive at this point then. So if, little children are running out in the street and there's somebody that's going 35 miles per hour and a kid runs out to get a ball, and I know this could be anywhere, but now that we're, in this neighborhood and there's significantly way more children than there were, and we're here now to try and be proactive about it, we're just going to be reactive and hope to God that nothing happens.
I don't agree with that because I think we're here talking about what we can do for traffic calming on the roadway.
Well,
I don't think
mean,
anyone said you can't
based
have
on The
that.
things that they've been doing so far, I mean, it's, the numbers aren't really showing a difference. Whatever the sign was that they put on Paoli Pike going on to Taylor Avenue, no through traffic, the numbers aren't changing. I mean, you can paint on the road, it's still not gonna change.
Understood, but in the actual data, the traffic speeds have been reduced since the speed humps went in for sure. So comparing the pre-speed hump speeds to the post-speed.
So
hump
the speed humps work is what you're telling me.
Work, correct.
Thank you.
Speed humps work very well at reducing speeds.
I guess just going back to your earlier comment, why this street versus others, I look at it from I don't know the street. It's not Monte Vista, maybe Linda Vista. Arguably could be another cut through from 352 to Paley Pike. But, there's a bend in there. This is a straightaway. So to go back to that earlier comment about why this street versus others, I think, again, it's like the volume. 2,600 cars measured in 1 week in March. With nicer weather, arguably, that's going to go even higher. That's a ton of traffic for a residential street. And then the other comment about
Just
go ahead,
which road are you talking about for 2,600 vehicles?
Highland Avenue, the March data.
That's over the full week in the March data.
Yeah, that's only 1 week times 4.
I don't. know
Which,
if you-
which is, no,
I
it's 2.5
understand.
times what it was. It's 2.5 times what it was in February. Let's put that in perspective.
That's the one we just
So-
had.
Just to get an understanding on my part, is our concern speed or is our concern cut through
It's
traffic?
speed. It is 100% speed.
Maria, I'd argue it's both. Derek, I had made the comment to you in the Board of Supervisor meeting. We have to find a way to make it a nuisance for someone that wants to cut through the street to go down it versus, you know what? I don't want to go over 4 speed bumps. I'm going to go around now. 2,600 cars is a lot of cars, but 44% of that. So 1 in almost every 2 cars was over the speed limit. 18 instances in that 1 week, they were doing 10 plus.
Well, again, from an engineering perspective, I don't know. It's gonna be a board decision, but from an
Right.
engineering perspective, I don't know if 2 more is gonna work for sure.
I agree. It's anyone's guess about the speed bumps. Can I make a comment about the current speed bumps though?
Sure.
Isn't there, there's a whole code or specification around speed bump design? Just like distance from one another?
Yeah.
I feel like when those were put in, maybe the code wasn't the same or just over time.
You think they've gotten beat up a little bit, not as effective?
I mean-
In height?
Yes, they don't match what's in the East Goshen Park, which I would say is a valid design. It's hexagonal. They've been so smashed down, any SUV or truck can run over those at speed, and it just feels like a pothole.
Yeah, I
So
will
that-
say that
that-
installing speed humps is a little bit tricky and no 2 speed humps are the same.
I
Because
agree.
they're supposed to be, those humps are supposed to be 12 feet and then between 3 and 4 inches high. And there is a real difference when it's 3 inches high versus 4 inches high based on how fast you can drive over it. So I've had instances where we've put them in brand new and had to tear them out because they were either too high or too low. Over time, could they have been beaten up? Yeah, it's possible that they might be a little bit lower than from an effective standpoint. Now, I drove over them. They felt pretty effective. I mean, I slowed down in an SUV. They seemed okay. There's only 2, but the 2 that were there seemed pretty good when I drove over them. But I
Right.
get your point as far as the height. The design hasn't changed from when those went in. They're Watts speed humps, they're called. They're not a speed table where there's a platform on top. They're just the arch overway, and it's 12 feet and about 3 inches high. So
So
Right.
Michael, question from me. If hypothetically, the board okayed another, speed hump here, can it be placed based on the layout now without moving the other 2? Or do you think it would have to move all the other 2 as well in order to make it work from an engineering perspective?
it could be placed with those 2. So what you have is about 650 feet from the western speed hump to 352.
Okay.
So in that area, you do have room to meet the spacing requirements to put another one in.
Mhm.
If I were to put 3 speed humps on this road, those aren't 2 of the locations that they would be. They'd be spread out a little bit more. You know, they'd kind of shift. But if you had to keep those 2 locations and you wanted to find a third,
You could
the
do it.
third would be between the western speed hump and 352. That's where it would
Sure,
fit.
sure.
You only have 470 feet on the other side between the eastern hump
Mhm.
and Taylor. So there's not as much room there when you take out the distance from the intersection. So if you were going to put a third in, it would be in that section from western to 352.
I mean, I will say the one thing I would ask the residents is if, the next time you're in front of the policymakers, board of supervisors at a meeting, I think just be more direct about what you want to, because I think it's been alluded to about, speed bumps but I think we've had a broader discussion at the board level about just concerns and what could we do. So if that's, a specific thing that you want, I think it needs to be more directly articulated to the board of supervisors. That's just my opinion.
I think we made mention of that, and it's Mark, right? Mark was sitting like one of these 2 seats.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying Mark,
He was kind of adamant against them at that meeting, at least.
yeah. Yeah, no, I'm trying to think back. Mark doesn't sit up here, so was it
Sorry.
somebody?
Who,
I forget the gentleman's name. Older gentleman is.
Herzog.
That's, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, I think it was mentioned, but I just want to.
I mean, not to go on a full tangent, but what's the frequency of road refreshing? Like, is there potential there too? Like, if you look at Highland Avenue, there's divots, sinkholes, the road's ripping up. It's narrow. Like, I don't want effort to go into putting a speed bump in or two or whatever, and then all of a sudden the roads,
Well, this
Getting-
is, so the other the other thing in this equation.
they go
is-
hand in hand.
The other part of this equation is Highland Avenue is actually, Mark will probably kill me for saying that. But Highland Avenue is actually scheduled right, and I say scheduled because sometimes things change, but it's scheduled to be repaved this summer. So some of that would be
Should be the perfect time to just throw in a speed bump while you're paving.
Is there a committee, involved in that? Because
involved in what?
in the repaving, because arguably I would like to get the whole neighborhood buy-in to agree to widen the street like 9 inches on each side. We can't have buses and trash trucks pass each other on the street. I mean, isn't that a
So
emergency liability?
So just that, no, the repaving project, so we do about 5 miles a year of the township. And we do it every summer and we try to turn the township over in 15 years or something like that.
Yeah.
No, it's strictly repaving the cartway now. I mean, what you're talking about is a bigger discussion and it's absent of a repaving project, whether you can get right away, on either side and put a cartway in there that's bigger. I mean, I haven't seen it done since I've been in this business as far as widening streets to that level, but no, that would be a separate process, absent the repaving.
You also need to understand that if you widen that roadway, you're gonna
It's more
increase the
speed,
speed.
you're
on
gonna
that
increase the
roadway.
speed.
So,
100%, yeah.
Yeah,
um,
I agree.
one of the traffic calming things that we've done in parts of our jurisdiction and we see done in other places is attempts made to actually visually narrow roadways. Even if you don't change the structure, if you make it look visually more narrow, either by painting lines or by putting in thin medians or whatever, that functions as a traffic calming thing because people gauge their speed based upon that. And so if if you talk about widening the road, absent all of the monetary considerations, that the expectation is that speed's gonna increase.
So maybe the last comment, if that's scheduled, I mean, could we really do an analysis on that street? I'm struggling how you couldn't fit 4 easily, like 150 feet off of 352. Yeah, you have plenty. And then the next one, 1613. That's gotta be well over the 250-foot minimum distance. I mean, I just, if you're doing speed bumps, in my opinion, let's do them. I don't know that it's even worth the effort to put in one, because you're still gonna have these gaps or lopsidedness where these cars are, they're able to just take off. If you're going, I guess, north on 352, after that S turn, I mean, you can pull off onto Highland doing easily 45. These cars come onto the street like a raceway. So I would agree, no matter what, if one could go 150 feet off of 352, that would have an impact. But hearing that this is going to be repaved, I mean, this is the most opportune time.
Yeah, I can't our discussion around speed bumps is kind of, do we install a permanent one or do we not install one at all? Is there anything like in the middle as far as like studies go to say, hey, are there temporary speed bumps to kind of place where, hey, we can continue doing these studies of the quantities of cars coming down the road, have temporary speed bumps, say, is this having an effect?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
You can. There's ones you can do to done temporarily. They kind of nail into.
Yeah, they
the
bolt
road,
down
Bolt
in
down to the
sections.
road. So yeah, that's an option to sort of see and then kind of maybe conduct those data sets again with a temporary one where a permanent one would potentially go. So yeah,
Aren't those just like the little yellow,
Small.
like they,
They're 12 feet.
I think,
no.
Okay.
I think,
they go-
I feel like I've seen longer, yeah.
They'll
bigger
match
ones.
the existing speed humps that are on the road. They just won't be asphalt. It's like a rubber.
Rigid plastic,
Yeah, like rigid plastic and rubber. They are a little bit noisy, but they're temporary, so it's usually not.
I don't know the cost of speed bumps, but one other factor that Carl and I were talking about is if the board of supervisors is adamant against it due to cost, what about the signs, the electronic signs
We did that.
that strobe at you when you're over 25? Like 3 of those along the street. Again, it's signage. I don't know that it's going to have any effect. I think speed bumps is potentially the biggest influencer here.
Well, I would like to kind of segue into that though, because I think it's clear that, when we present to the Board of Supervisors, April 16th, we'll definitely have that conversation around this meeting and let everybody know that I think the speed humps are obviously the most popular choice among the residents and whether that would be
And I
These-
just want to say, like, I appreciate everything you guys are doing as far as like, putting up the signage and whatever to try and, help out. But in all honesty, I know you're not supposed to tell us about whatever they might be paving or whatever, but if we can do this in the summer while they're doing, summer is when the kids are out the most. That's when, these kids are running across the street, they're going from house to house, they're biking and whatever. If we could just push this forward as quickly as possible, because this has been like, I understand the politics of it all, and I get it. But, if we could figure out a way to maybe not just, okay, let's put up speed signs and let's just put up fake speed bumps. Whatever we can do to push forward, like, just let us know so we can have our statements ready and whatever you think is gonna be best.
Also, I do want to reiterate the fact that, a lot of this conversation is around Highland Avenue, where, the path is also Taylor, which is the road I live on. So looking at Taylor could potentially be another place to, if we're going to add more speed bumps, we could look on that road too.
I don't disagree, honestly. And you could sit on Taylor, especially at that 3-way intersection, and ticket people all day long.
Well, we can't, and I'll tell you exactly why.
Okay.
I think that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about what the police do and don't have the ability to do. So let me kind of address that. The first thing is that our ability to monitor speed is limited to a certain degree by the state. We're not allowed to use radar. We're the only state in the union that can't use radar to enforce speed. So the general way that we do that is we set up timing lines that are 150 feet apart, and we sit there with a stopwatch. So we need a place to sit, and we need to generally sit in a place where we can see the lines, but people aren't completely focused on us, because if they see us, they're gonna slow down. And we certainly have a lot of places in our jurisdiction to be able to do that. We haven't looked at those roads specifically for places for us to sit. We do have an unmarked car that we can use for that, for that purpose. However, we're not allowed to stop and initiate a traffic stop for speed unless the person is going a minimum of 11 miles an hour in excess of the speed limit. So on your roads, you're talking about 36 miles an hour. From looking at the data, depending on which data sets you're looking at, anywhere from 1 to 4% of the vehicles that travel on those roadways are traveling at an enforceable speed. So,
I meant more people not even stopping at that stop sign. I mean, that's the other risk. They're full speed, 35, 30, whatever. They blow right through that stop sign.
okay.
You could ticket
So
people all
this is
day
the
long.
first that the police department has received any complaints about that stop sign. So we've gone back and done some data mining and things of that nature. We don't have, certainly I know that from our conversations, complaints have come in to the township, but the police department hasn't specifically seen that. So it hasn't been something that's been on our radar screen. We can certainly take a look at it and see if there are stop sign issues, but in terms of speed issues, we're literally getting less than 10 cars per day on any of those streets that are traveling at an enforceable speed. As you're probably aware, we have somewhat limited resources. So when we go out to do enforcement, we do our enforcement based upon traffic studies. And we look at that 85th percentile that we've been looking at. So we look at the 85th percentile, and then we look at the overall percentage of vehicles that are traveling at or above an enforceable speed. And we generally look at 10% as our cutoff to be able to dedicate any kind of significant time or resources, because your complaints are very similar to complaints that we get from all over our jurisdiction. And we need to try to find a way to weed that out. We have many, many neighborhoods where, when we have 30%, 40% of vehicles traveling in excess of the posted speed, that certainly is going to grab our attention and garner a lot of our resources. We have, the other thing that we do is we look at sightline issues when we come in to look at these roadways, and we look at crash data. We certainly don't have any sightline issues on Highland because it's a nice straight street, and there's no crash data that we have for the street itself. Certainly we have crashes there on 352, particularly around the curve. That's been better substantially since it's been redesigned. Our crashes have been reduced by, I think, 60% on that S curve since it was redone. Still an issue for us. But other than that intersection being used as a marker, we don't have any actual crashes that have occurred on Highland, or as far as I was able to see over the last 5 years, any of the connector streets, Taylor, things of that nature.
So, Michael, just to kind of ask you a couple questions. I mean, obviously, we'll bring the speed bump request to the board of supervisors, and I'm sure there'll be residents there when we have it on the agenda. Is there any, I kind of want to have a conversation too about anything else. Obviously we did some small things in the meantime that I said we can do administratively. Is there anything else from an engineering perspective that, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot if you have to get back to me via email or something like that, that we can do? And I'm not just saying in lieu of speed humps, but also just any other measures around the peripheral that we're not considering that may help, would be, helpful for me to know. So I just want to put that out there.
The two sort of main traffic calming elements, there's a third with signage and striping, but they often don't have a huge impact on speeds.
Sure.
The two that have the most are either vertical deflection like speed humps or speed tables, or horizontal deflection. So as a sergeant mentioned, narrowing the roadway, well, you can narrow in different ways to have sort of, they call them chicanes, where you almost have to weave around sort of a bump out from the side of the
It's
road.
already too small.
It's such a narrow roadway. I mean, you're at, it's, I don't know, I think it's
gotta
less
be
than saying 18 feet,
gotta be
less than
18
20 feet.
Yeah,
So you gotta be careful where you chicane people going around. I'll tell you, one of the best traffic calming elements out there is on-street parking, although it's really tough to on-street park on this road because it's so narrow, because you can't really speed on a road with on-street parking if you're kind of going around other cars. But this road's so narrow that that's tough to do. Some folks have tried sort of in roadway signs.
you know, like right in the center of the roadway. They're often used at pedestrian crossings where it's a little, you know, it's like a little
Yeah.
rectangular sign for pedestrians, but it can also be put right in the middle of the road that says slow down, just
I think I was
generally, you know,
telling
or
my
something like that.
daughter's school has that.
Yeah, they have those, you know, in the middle of the roadway. You're gonna have to, they're a little bit of a maintenance issue. You're gonna have to replace them. The base kind of mounts down. It's a rubber base and the sign sits in there and the signs do get clipped here and there and
But
you gotta
that's
put the
even,
sign back on.
but this road's probably even too small for that, right?
It's a
Or-
little narrow for that. So it's narrow in the sense that if that were there, you could get around it on either side. It gets a little tough if you happen to have two cars coming at the
Trash
same time.
trucks. and-
Trash trucks and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Like I said,
yeah.
they're probably gonna get nicked because the roadway's so narrow
Mhm.
here and there, but as far as other elements, I think vertical deflection is the best for this roadway just because of how narrow it is. It doesn't really line up well for horizontal deflection. It's already narrowed. You know, I definitely wouldn't want to widen it. I mean, that really does increase speeds when you widen the roadway. People feel more comfortable to go faster.
Mhm.
But other than that, you're already trying some signage elements.
Yep.
There's not a whole lot else out there.
We, so our police department just received a new, speed and signage trailer, which is really nice. That gives you your flashing lights when you exceed certain speeds and things of that nature. We're certainly more than happy to deploy it in the neighborhood in various locations, where we have the ability to fit it. It also has the ability to collect data, so we can use that.
That's,
You know, we can set it up for a week or so. and
With
get-
all due respect, I asked for this like 3 years ago and we've already had it. And it's, I
So-
appreciate that. And it maybe for the time being, that would be great, but it's not a solution.
Well, no, and I was trying to say that it's not a solution. These things have a temporary effect on driver behavior. And when you remove them, depending on the kind of traffic that you have there, the effect is rather temporary, but we certainly have the ability to do that, and we have the ability to monitor traffic to do that. But when you look at the traffic volumes there, at least statistically by the number of houses and the number of trips, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the general rule of thumb is 8 to 10 trips per household per day. So is what a neighborhood will generate. And from looking at the numbers, you're a little bit above that, but the majority of the traffic that you have in those neighborhoods is coming from your neighborhoods. So if you have speeding issues and speeding problems and things of that nature, it's primarily coming from the people that live within your own development.
Wouldn't
right?
it save the police department and everybody else significant amount of resources and money if we just put a speed bump in?
That's a decision
I just,
that
I just
don't
want to
have
be
the
very,
ability-
I just want to be very clear. Nobody up here has the ability to make that call.
I
Right.
understand
And-
that, but I'm
and-
just making
and
my point just
So
like.
the other thing is nobody up here is telling you that
We're not.
we're
right?
not gonna do it. Nobody up here is telling you that they don't want it done. We're just trying to, number one, get your input.
Right.
And number two, give you some realistic expectations of what's possible and what's not possible, because I would expect that one of the things that you're going to run into is exactly what your mom ran into when she tried to do this back in '06, that you've got a certain group of residents that see a real issue and see a real problem and are looking for a permanent solution. And you've got other residents that are going to say, I don't want that in front of my house. And you're going to get into some of these neighborhood issues. And we've had some of these in other areas of our jurisdictions. Some have worked out really well. Our Jacqueline Drive was brought up. We had huge problems on that roadway. Speed humps were installed and it made a significant change in the roadway. And we were out there doing enforcement 3 times a
Do
week.
you know how many Jacqueline Drive has? Was it 3?
It has,
Four.
yes, it has 3. It has 2 within the 250 feet in an area that that affects traffic that comes immediately off of Route 202.
Yep.
And then downstream after an intersection, there's one more to try to calm it down. And it's made substantial difference on that roadway. we have had other places in our jurisdiction, primarily in Thornbury Township, where they put in speed humps at the request of residents, and then ended up having the residents petition to have them all removed because of roadway noise, people doing burnouts on them, and people getting their properties vandalized because they were angry about the speed humps. So those are all things that that are going to be part of the discussion that you folks need to have within your own neighborhood, and just have an understanding that
Which is great because Carl and, I mean, they've gone door to door, which is
Yeah,
well,
fabulous.
if
Yeah.
we-
and that's a good thing.
If we do, if hypothetically the board of supervisors says okay to, any speed hump, whether it's one or two, we would use the PennDOT threshold of going to the petition 70%. I think it was for the PennDOT standards. But what you're saying is correct. I will 100% get one or two people that email me saying they don't like it. That's
Sure.
not a matter of if that.
You're
is
gonna
done.
have that with
But
with
it is
anything
what
that
it
you
is.
do, but
Yeah.
you just need to kind of realize
Yeah.
that when you go into this,
Sure.
when you go into this process.
Yeah.
People
I
didn't like
think-
Haley Pike going from 45 to 35, but it is what it is. Like we're talking about livelihood here. So I can't stand to think that it's gonna take someone to get hit, seriously injured, killed for something to happen. I mean, can we, thinking ahead to the April Board of Supervisor meeting, can we all get alignment? Like at a minimum, 2, maybe 3 speed bumps and try it out, whether they're bolted or not. 2 on Taylor and maybe 1 on Highland, or vice versa.
Well, this is the first time we're talking about Taylor. That's never been talked about in the board meeting. as far as-
No, we brought that up since the January board meeting, since we attended.
For actual speed humps, it's always been about the Highland Avenue. I mean, we've never talked about that, so that has to be brought up to the board. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how many you can fit on there. I'd have to talk to Michael and see.
Yeah, we're just looking at spacing.
Yeah.
Like I'm not, whatever it takes, whether there's a more analysis that needs to be done on spacing, but I think there's alignment that the request would be like at least 2, if not 3. Again, you have to let's get the distance correct, the dimensions correct. Let's make it a bit of a nuisance for people to want to use this as a cut through. But as they stand now, the repainting, I appreciate. The new signage, it's just not an optimal layout. Like it, no matter what happens, as it stands today, the results already show it's not going to do much more.
If I can just perhaps caution
Yep.
how you want to tailor your discussion. If you do things with a specific intent, with a specific goal of trying to prevent the public from using a public roadway, you could run into issues, right? So neighborhood concerns about cut through traffic are a common thing that we deal with throughout our townships. And I understand that complaint. But they are public roadways that the public is allowed to use and to traverse. If there are concerns, I mean, if
I completely
I
follow
mean,
that.
So I'm trying to be as generic as I
Yeah,
can,
right.
right? Without causing any issues down the road, but you just need to be careful how you frame that discussion. If the issue is traffic volume, or things of that nature, I mean, one of the things that you can do is you can make the road one way. And that'll solve, it'll reduce your traffic by 50%, it'll reduce your speeders by 50%. You know, and that could solve your problem, but it's probably not something that people in the neighborhood want to hear. So how you frame that discussion, if you have a specific concern for safety because of speed and things on that roadway, you know, a legitimate issue, legitimate concern, that you may want to focus your time and attention on. But if you try to bring to the townships, I don't want anybody other than residents to use my roadway. If that's the angle of attack that you
No.
choose to
No.
take, you're gonna run into some resistance on that.
Right, I follow all that, and yeah, it is a public road.
Yeah.
It means you're gonna have to go over additional speed bumps.
I,
We're not trying, it's just, I'm
I-
thinking of a street behind Route 30 in Paoli, behind the train tracks where they put in, I kid you not, like 8 speed bumps. And people said, I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna go and I'll just deal with the traffic lights on Route 30. I mean, that's kind of my mentality. Yes, it's a public road. It just means you're gonna have to start going over the speed bumps.
and that's legitimate, and that's how I would frame that discussion, not to say we don't want people to use our roadway.
Yeah,
Do you understand the difference I'm trying to?
Yeah, I guess my ask is just for that April meeting, do we need additional analysis? Do we need, I'm happy to meet with you on the street if needed. Where can they be placed? How many? Do we want to try and do a bolt down as a trial and error first? I want things moving because all of a sudden, Derek, it's going to be June, July, August, whatever, and the street was repaved, and then the township's gonna really be like,
Well, no, I don't think there needs to be any more analysis. I think we've been talking about it enough that we understand what residents want. I think it's just a matter of the board members saying yay or nay. I think my personal opinion, yeah, I think the temporary one put down. And again, I quite honestly have had the mentality in my head, if there's gonna be a speed bump addition, it would be one. Clearly, residents aren't gonna agree with me with that, in the room, but, so that's gonna be another thing to discuss to the board, of supervisors. Probably get more input from you on that as far as the distance and things of
Sure.
that nature.
I can give you recommendations on spacing.
Yeah,
One of the biggest issues with speed humps is where they go. And where they go, I'm looking at that plan, I wasn't involved. I'm gonna guess that the highlighted addresses are people that raised their hand and said, yes, I would accept a speed hump in front of my house. Which is-
I don't think we know why they're
Which-
nothing.
Which is often, like, my guess is why it's a little bit unbalanced on this roadway is you may not have had every property owner that wanted one in front of their
And
house.
again,
So-
like I said, there were no like small children
Yeah.
on the street, I
No,
think,
I'm just,
at the
to
time.
the,
That's,
to the point of adding more speed humps, we have to know where they're
Yeah.
gonna be viable, and we
Right.
need to know which properties are gonna be okay with a speed hump in front of their property.
Yeah.
I don't know that the board's gonna
Which
wanna
I think with-
force
when
a
they
speed hump in
were-
front of someone's
right.
property, and if a speed hump's going and someone says, I do not want this in front of my property, that person, to be honest, there's a lot of data here, they could look at the manual as well and say, wait a second, you don't even meet the requirements for 85th percentile speed, why are you putting a speed hump in front of my property? So
Mhm.
having agreement on where these can go is important, because that's gonna help me lay out, if we're gonna add one, where it can go and where they can all go.
And honestly, I feel like we'd be happy to, we have a list of neighbors that have signed a petition already with their addresses and their signatures, and we'd be happy to show you where, and I think it would probably line up with where the speed bumps could go based on, the data and the feet of however far apart they need to be. I think you'd probably be pretty surprised they line up pretty accurately with where they could go.
Signing it, does the petition say that they're okay with it in front of their house too, which is
No.
important?
It does not,
I'd
but.
be surprised how some people would be like, I want speed humps, I just don't want it right in front of my property here by my driveway and that sort of thing. So I'm just cautioning, I don't want to go too far and then it turns out we run into a problem with a property owner that doesn't want it there. So I can lay out speed humps on this street all day where I think they should go, but if the person's going to be dead set against it, then we'd have to, readjust it. So any information you guys have, because it sounds like you've done a great amount of due diligence in trying to get information from neighbors, talking to neighbors. that element of it is really important when looking at speed humps. as
Does
far as
a,
where they-
does a resident really have say on a public township or state road where something falls?
No,
Like
I mean, no.
you guys throw well, not telephone poles is a bad example. Signs, speed limit signs, like I can't say, Derek, I don't want a speed limit sign in my grass that I have to weed whack around.
No, because it'd be in our right of way.
But
Right.
also a speed limit sign is a required traffic control device.
I know, but
Traffic calming is not a required traffic control.
I guess my
device.
point is they can argue about they don't want a speed bump in front of their house, but they aren't paying taxes. They're not paying their millage for that road. I don't know. And
Whether or
it-
not the board's gonna wanna put one in front of someone's property that doesn't want it there is a
Right.
discussion for the board. I'm cautioning often, that is a big part of it. That, you know, they don't wanna put it in front of someone's property that doesn't want it there because it's not a requirement.
I just want to circle back to, we keep talking about the 85th percentile, but again, that's a data set taken over just 1 week. Like if it was there for a month,
You're right, but I'll say this, because I don't want you to go too far on that. If the
Right.
85th percentile speed was 50 miles an hour on this road, there's still not a requirement to put speed humps in.
I get it.
So the speed humps are never a required traffic control device.
I get it.
They're an add-on for traffic calming. So it's not that the 85th, if the 85th were over something, we could just go force a speed hump in. They're still not required, you know, it's an addition. If you have an 85th at 50, then the sergeant better be out there with painted lines and pulling people over.
Right.
But
I
yeah,
totally follow that.
Okay.
I want to, if we're doing it, if we get agreement that it's speed bumps, like let's do speed bumps and do it right this time. Not, I mean, truthfully, like let's logically lay them out so that it has the biggest impact with the least amount of wasting everyone's time. I guess that's just my ask.
That's the argument that you may need to make to the board.
Right.
yeah.
Because we can agree with you all day long, but they're the ultimate arbiters of, you know, of the decision. We're just trying to make sure that you're going in with your eyes open and understanding, you know, some of the arguments that you're either gonna have from coming from within your own neighborhood, or things that you're gonna have to overcome or convince your elected officials to overcome to be able to get what it is that you want to get.
So Derek, if this is presented in April, can you talk through what steps are necessary? It's brought up in April, but then I guess communication needs to go out
Communication.
to the neighborhood. Like eventually, how do you then get the yay or nay? There's a
So
vote here on the board, but then what about the residents of the street? I just,
depends what process you go through. So if you go, so if it's a permit, if it's a call for permanent speed humps at the time, then we would probably use the PennDOT guidelines of trying to get 70% on board like they did when they first put, I think that's the number they used was 70% to get the neighborhood again on board with the idea, and that's what they did it. If it's a temporary measure, as far as if we do the temporary and bolt it in and try to do that, then I don't necessarily know if we need to do the petition. If it's just a temporary, we're seeing how it's gonna go. I mean, if it's that, we probably wouldn't have to go through. We probably would just do it. We probably, based on
Yeah, I
input
would
from
think-
Michael, we would be able to put them down pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, I think the temporary, the idea would be, it would be there as a temporary measure, and if it seems like it's doing well, it would be replaced with a permanent speed hump. So I think at the time, if we see data that comes back with a temporary hump and it looks like it's beneficial to have it there, you would then have to go through the approval process to get the permanent hump in.
I also don't want to tie this into I know I mentioned the repaving, but this could be done absent
Yeah.
regardless of what's going on with the repaving. I just, obviously it's a good time to think about it because of that, but it's not the end all be all tying it together with the repaving.
sure, I guess I was just viewing it from the standpoint of repaving could also mean that's the opportunity to shift where the current ones are so that there's better spacing. Like I don't want you're repaving the road. I don't want the two there now being like, oh, we must work around these, and that means we can only put one in. I don't know the length of that road, but you look at it, I don't see how you couldn't have four.
I'd like to get some different designs from Michael and see what he comes up with. I'm not, one way or the other, I'm not gonna sit here and say, we'll definitely keep them there or they'll definitely shift. I don't know at this point.
I follow that, but I mean, to Eric brought it up earlier, Taylor was brought up and that is an issue. I think we need to do something there.
Well, yeah, I mean, Taylor's on that. I mean, it's part of the line to be able to cut through from Paoli to Highland. I don't think we can count that out as being a road to not put speed bumps on, because we have brought it up.
They put speed limits on there too to like gauge? No,
I don't
there
know.
were no.
The
I mean,
problem is, the problem is Taylor doesn't have any speed humps right now at all. I know, so the issue there is, quite honestly, if Highland didn't have any at this point, it'd be an entirely different conversation that we were having right now. Because, and you guys could correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I feel the way things are nowadays, getting speed humps to places that don't have them, I mean, as somebody said, it's kind of the last resort, particularly ones that don't have them at this point. But again, we can bring that up to the board and see what they feel. and
Yeah,
how they
you could
think.
look at Highland as a road that's in the past has already been approved for traffic calming and needing traffic calming. So adjusting or adding elements of traffic calming may be under the same umbrella that, excuse me, that it was approved for traffic calming earlier, you know, so it's sort of a traffic calmed roadway, for lack of a better term, in the township already. Taylor isn't necessarily, so it'll be looked at as a fresh road.
The one thing I wanted to ask you, I think I had a conversation with you offline about this. And I know Google Waze and stuff, you know, obviously if there's traffic can have an impact on where people go. And I know you said some engineers had tried to reach out and with those companies and see if there's ways to not redirect them through neighborhoods. I know
Kind of take these roads off of their routing,
Yeah,
basically. So if you're coming down Paoli and it's backed up a little bit, they could reroute you onto these roads.
So if you
through
could look
Waze
into
or-
that
yeah,
a
I
little
will
bit
look
for me,
into that.
Michael, that would be great, just to kind of check that out. So,
Can you pull up the 06 data one last time? What did the volume look like?
so this is eastbound to westbound. So these are totals, right? Looks like it.
No, I think at the bottom.
That's a day.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's just a day. Yeah, this is one day. I don't know if the total's up top. That's why I was
Might be to the right a little bit.
okay.
I'm trying to see it. Now, if you scroll down, see the total line there.
Yeah, I think they're just specific days.
That's a 255 minute. Yeah, I'd have to print these out and look at how this data was collected. It's
Yeah,
different than the other
you
data.
you haven't even seen it.
I haven't seen this
I
one
just
yet.
found
Okay.
this, so I can print it out, but that was just daily. But that's why I was trying to focus on more of the speed on this than the volume, because I know it wasn't comparable.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're coming to the end of this. But I was initially brought into this because there was, hey, these cars are just flying down the street. We're walking kids home from the bus stop, and these people are just flying. I mean, I've had the same thing happen to me. I'm walking my kids, you know, down and back from the bus stop, and like Amazon drivers are probably the worst. They're probably the ones that are flying 40, 45 miles an hour now. So I mean, to me, the overall concern is the speed. I totally get where you're going. They're public roads. The quantity of cars kind of really doesn't matter. But when it's speed, yeah, when it's speed and we have all these kids in the neighborhood, it's a safety issue. So I mean, the speed is really what we're trying to affect here.
Yeah, I mean,
so I
don't-
just kind of want to leave it at that.
Please don't misinterpret what I'm trying to say. I understand that volume and things of that nature, they're quality of life issues. They absolutely are. I understand that complaint, but when you're taking it to a group of elected officials, you just need to be careful about how it is that you present that as a safety issue as opposed to not just a quality of life issue, but it's, you know, governments get very concerned about encroaching upon people's liberties. And so you need to make sure that however it is that you present your information is not geared towards doing that. It's geared towards solving a specific articulable safety issue in your particular neighborhood, because it's been my experience that when people approach it in an opposite way, then it presents problems. One of the big issues that we see is people want signs that say no trucks, right? Can't do that. There are signs out there that exist like that, but they're absolutely not legal and not enforceable in a lot of different circumstances. So when people start going down that path, they expend a lot of energy and, they come to the end of the road and find out that, their efforts were for naught, and clearly you've got a very concerned, dedicated group of people here that are looking for real answers and real solutions. If you want that, you need to make sure that it's done in the right way and because like I said, if you start pounding your feet and say, oh, I'm tired of all these people cutting through, there's an easy solution, and that's to make your road one way. And you're probably not going to like that answer. And they may come down and say, well, guess what? That's what we're going to do for you. And then you're in a position that's maybe potentially worse than where you're at right now. So just keeping those things in mind is important as you move forward. So where exactly is your children's bus stop?
Oh, mine's down Taylor. So if you actually keep showing.
Taylor and
Yeah,
what?
if you, Taylor and Madison, there you go.
Taylor and Madison.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah, it's not even on this map.
But regardless, they have to walk through all the way through. to
right,
there.
we just.
But it is, I mean, further down there, I mean, it is just a complete straightaway, and it's downhill and slightly uphill. So cars are flying down one way, and then they fly down the other way. So
We just like to know where the bus stops are because we spot check bus stops and things of that nature on a
Okay.
regular basis. So we can put you on the list for that as well.
Great.
So, presence in the neighborhood is a real thing.
Thank
So I'm still not fully clear, but for April's meeting, are we able to potentially have a engineering draft proposal that could be shared with?
I mean, I can have some preliminary designs from Michael to show different options on the speed humps at that meeting. Yes.
Can we please have Highland and Taylor
Highland and Taylor for speed bumps.
a proposal?
We could put that on there, but again, I'm going to go back to the fact that that's entirely a road with no speed bumps at this point. So I don't know how the board is going to feel about that. I know you said Taylor was brought up, but if I go back and watch the video, most of the speed hump conversation has been on Highland. So to them, it's going to be brand new. I don't know if they're going to want time to think about that again and not approve anything that night. I know people think I may know exactly what the Board of Supervisors is going to do. I can tell you right now, I don't for many issues. So, I mean, we could put that on there as options, but I don't know how they're going to take it. I'm just being honest.
Okay. Well, so
Just so I know, the Taylor section is from Paoli to Highland, that section of Taylor, that's what we're talking about.
right.
Yes, if I may chime in here, please. That section of Taylor is essentially should be considered Highland. It just swerves right to Paoli Pike. It's the big part of the problem. We did bring it up at the last meeting. It is very important. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. We have 100% people signed the petition on that section of Taylor. So it's not going to be anybody that's going to object to it. Everybody, the lady that lives at that stop sign, we could bring her in. She's like scared for her life to even work on her garden. So I don't think it's a new issue. I think from even 2006, the people that are cutting down Highland are using Taylor. Without Taylor, we wouldn't have the problem.
No, I'm not saying it's a new issue. I'm saying it's a new speed bump request on a new road.
yeah,
That's
so
all.
just to clarify, you're saying because there are no speed bumps there right now,
It's a difficult-
it's
it's a more
harder to
difficult
alter it
lift.
to incorporate
That
speed
is-
bumps,
that 100%
whereas
correct.
Highland has it. So we can do work with speed bumps on that because they're already there. They're present.
It's
on
a
Highland.
heavier lift to get speed bumps on the
Brand
street, but doesn't have. That's kind of, yes.
Well, they did
I
they
understand
did
it,
in
don't agree with it, but I
2000
get
they
it.
did In 2006, so why not reintroduce it now?
Yeah, and to just, that was Carl. We have, I think, all but two folks that we spoke with on that section of Taylor, and everyone who we did end up speaking with, they are in agreement. So we have 100% agreement with those that we spoke to. It's all but two neighbors that I have never caught up with.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank obviously everyone here for taking their time, but also what has been done so far hasn't gone unnoticed. You guys have done a lot, the new paintings and the signage. So I guess it's us just being adamant about excelling it to the next step. So I do want to say thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I like I said, unless there shouldn't be a delay because we have a month till the next meeting. So April 16th should be fine. And we'll go from there. But I would just again and maybe there's just a different perception issue of kind of how it was talked about in the past, but I think to me, it was a more broad conversation in the last few meetings. And if you guys want to just kind of reiterate and specifically focus on the speed hump thing, I think that would probably be best for the purposes of the Board of Supervisors and getting it across to them. So that's just my advice, but. Are there any other, before we wrap up, any other public comments either on Zoom or in the room? Does anybody have anything on the committee? Nope. Then I will move for adjournment. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Give us the